The meeting order and start with our announcements.
Can we have the announcements?
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
Okay, I would like to call the June 21st Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. Okay, we have the May 10th meeting minutes in front of you. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Our only case today is BZA 2018-00032. It's a city variance to reduce parking requirement from 18 to 13 spaces, a reduction of 28%, and to reduce the required parking setback to 8 feet. Do we have anybody on the commission that wishes to hear this one?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be abstaining from that item.
Do we have anybody in the audience wishing to hear this item? Seeing none, we can take it by consent. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Third.
Any discussion? Mr. Warren made the motion. Ms. Miles made the second. Actually, it was the third, but I'm going to give her the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 yeas and 1 abstention. Mr. Foster abstained. Okay. We'll adjourn the Board of Zoning Appeals. Do we need a motion for that? Okay. I'd like now to call the June 21st meeting of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission to order. We have no minutes. We'll go first to our subdivision committee recommendations. We have a one-step final plat, subdivision 2018 quadruple 05, Carriage Oaks, second edition. Anybody on the commission wishing to hear that? Seeing none, anyone in the audience wishing to hear that item? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent. Subdivision 00015, a one-step final plat for the Islamic Cemetery Edition. Anybody on the commission wishing to hear that item? Anybody in the audience? Okay, we'll take that by consent. And the 00017, a one-step final plat for Rhodes Inn Ranch Edition. Anyone on the commission wishing to hear that item? Anyone in the audience wishing to hear that item? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent. We have 3 items for consent. They were all submitted to us by the subdivision committee with the 7-0 approval.
Move we approve.
Who's that? Mr. Green? Who wants the second? Okay, you have that? Rob is second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We have a vacation item. 3-1 and 3-2 is deferred, so we'll take 3-1. It was a vacation item 00013. City vacation of 20-foot right-of-way and a 35-foot platted setback. Anybody on the commission wish to hear this item? Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, that was also approved 7-0 by the subdivision committee. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Got that? All right. Anybody have anything to say about them? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Moving right along. As I said, 3-2 was deferred. Case number 4, which is 00028, a city amendment to the CUP DP 238 for changes in architectural and developmental controls for a senior housing development on a property zone LC limited commercial. Anyone want to hear it? Okay, we'll hear this. Case number 00021, a city conditional use to allow a nightclub. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wishing to hear that item? No? Okay, we'll take that by consent. Item 6, which is 00022, another city conditional use for a nightclub. A city within 300 feet of a church in a LC limited commercial zoning district. Anybody will hear that one. Item 7, 00023, which is case number 7, city conditional use for a 100-foot tall wireless communication facility. Anyone wishing to hear that item on the commission? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wishing to hear that item? Okay, we'll take that by consent. Item 8, zoning case 2018-00017 for a county protective overlay. Anyone in the commission wishing to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wishing to hear that item?
Yes.
Okay, we'll hear that item.
Applicant.
They're the applicant.
Oh, anybody wish to talk on the item in opposition?
I think the applicant may want some clarification because I think they have some differing thoughts from the staff report. Not certain on that. But yeah.
You want to, okay, we'll recognize them at the time.
Mr. Chairman, I will be abstaining from item 7 and item 8.
Excuse me?
I'll be abstaining from item 7 and item 8.
Item 9, it's case number 00024, a city zone change from GC, general commercial, to SF5, single family. Anybody in the commission wishing to hear that item? Okay. Anybody in the audience wishing to hear that item? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent. All right, let's take item 5 and item 9.
Move to approve item 5 and item 9.
Oh, let's hold on 7 since we got an abstention. 5 and 9,
7 and 9.
Second.
second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we'll take item 7.
Move to approve.
Second.
Item 2, Mr. Warren, Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Okay. So we'll go back to case number 00021. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave here out with planning staff. This request is for an amendment to Community Unit Plan 238. This would be Amendment 3. It concerns the property at the north end of the large limited commercial property. We're at 21st Street East and, or East 21st Street North and North 127th Street East. It concerns the just under 7 acres at the north end of the property. Camden Chase is on the north side of the property. The applicant, and you can, this aerial shows the property in question. It is undeveloped at this time. There is nothing on the property. You'll see that from the aerial or from the pictures that I'll show you here in a second. This gives you an orientation of the property in relation to the improvements. This is the Hawthorne addition that sits north and to the east. We have other residential development to the west. And then the Magdalene Church is immediately west on the other side of 127th Street. This is a copy of the comprehensive plan. You can see this is an area designated for residential and employment mix for future development. Obviously, we're along the 21st Street corridor as it moves out of Sedgwick County and into Butler County and Andover on further to the east. This is a copy of just the CUP that shows how the overall property is laid out. We have several parcels, a larger parcel immediately to the south, and then out parcels that are closer to the intersection of 121st Street, or 127th Street and 21st Street. This is a site drawing of kind of a sketch of layout showing the proposal that was submitted by the applicant, and what they provided shows the layout of the proposed residential structure on the property in relationship to the property. 127th Street is here on the west side. Camden Chase comes in along the north. There is a proposal for a drive entrance kind of at the southeast corner or southwest corner of the property. It comes out to 127th Street, and then they're showing an access that goes into Camden Chase. You'll see in the staff report, and I provided you a copy of the information from the fire department that indicates that's a gated emergency access only. This is a rendering that was provided by the applicant that shows the appearance of what we've been told is the existing facility that this company has, and I believe this is the Shawnee, Kansas property. Photos taken of the area. This is looking north along 127th Street. The property in question sits just south of the tree line at this end of the aerial. You can see the edge of the church on the west side of 127th Street. That's looking west from the site towards the church property. Another one looking west. This is roughly right across from where the drive entrance would come out onto 127th Street, which is lines up pretty close with the drive entrance that goes in on the north side of the church property on the west side of 127th. This is the looking northwest at some of the homes that are north of the church and northwest of the property. This is looking north along 127th Street. You can see here's the houses that I was talking about in the previous picture. This is Camden Chase. This is the entrance into Hawthorne, and the subject property is just to the right on this picture. That's looking south along 127th Street. We're right at the intersection of Camden Chase. So the property in question is right here on this edge of and you can see the street sign there on the corner. That's the same thing, looking a little more, looking southeast, and the property in question is right here. You can already see there's kind of a berm that's been built on the south side across on the other property to the south. That's looking due east from 127th Street into, I'm looking at the entrance into along Camden Chase. Gives you an idea of what the existing landscaping and a little bit of berming that's on the south side of Camden Chase. In that picture, a little better angle, and you can see how the road meanders back into the development further to internally into the Hawthorne. I'm now back in, we're kind of at the west corner of the property in question. This is the, and I forget the street name on the west side. Yeah. Lindsay, but this is looking back west along Camden Chase, coming out of the Hawthorne, meandering back out towards 127th Street on further to the west. This is taken from Camden Chase, looking south into the property. Again, you can see this berm that already exists on the south side of the property in question. And I'm looking north at the street that goes, and I think that's Peckham Street as it goes north from Camden Chase back into the Hawthorne addition. This is again looking south, roughly where the entrance is, I guess, proposed coming out of this project. Looking south towards, you can see the improvement on the south side of 21st Street. The lights at 21st and 127th are kind of in the background. Also took this to verify, yeah, the sign was up. So anyway, those are the aerial photos. Staff report gives you the background of what's being recommended. The staff is recommending approval. We've made modifications, and we've got attached to this the further modifications, clarifications we're recommending with respect to the other conditions within the CUP that would be applicable, and how we're identifying how the improvements in this particular property would occur. I would stress that the two big issues really are as noted, the requirement for modifications on architectural standards, requesting that the architectural design for this property be internal amongst itself as opposed to having to be architecturally compatible with how other commercial development within the overall CUP might occur all the way down to 21st Street. Also, some requests to modify the height restrictions within the current document in the CUP. So other than that, we are recommending approval subject to the modifications that are in the staff report provided to you. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for staff?
Dave, can you go back to the site plan for a moment and clarify for me the applicant showing what looks to be a entrance off of Camden Chase?
Yes, right here.
And are you saying that your recommendation is that that be gated for fire access only?
Fire department had indicated that their understanding would be this was a gated entrance that would be accessible as emergency entrance only. I think we provided you a copy of the email from the fire department that indicated that's what they
I
were doing.
understand, but it was not clear to me it was Camden Chase versus the one off of 127th Street.
No, I'm sorry if that's, yeah, this would only be applicable to the Camden Chase entrance. It would be full access out on 127th Street.
Any other questions for staff? Yes, sir, Mr. Point.
Did this go before the DAB board?
Not yet. This is amendment to the CUP. If there are protests, it will go to the DAB board. Otherwise, and they'll help. That's my understanding procedure is that unless there are protests, the action is exclusive by the planning commission.
Do you know if this rendering of the building is the same as what you showed on the slide?
No, that's being provided by the applicant. I've not seen that, so you'll have to ask them when they come up.
You'll hold that question. Foster.
Dale, I'm real curious. We've never seen on a staff report where it says, goes to the DAB, then only if protested. Never seen that.
Well, we've been doing that because the issue is because the planning commission meets twice a month. All of the district advisory boards except one only meet once a month. So some of these cases don't get to them until 3 weeks later. So it's a week overdue for the protest period. And so that's the arrangement we've got now is that if the planning commission approves it and there is no protest, then we don't take it to the DAB because by the time they get it, the protest period is over.
And that's prior to the governing body action.
Well, the governing body doesn't see it unless there's a protest. Amendments do not go to the council.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm following.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
The first provision that it says the proposed development of parcel one is a low-volume traffic generator, and the construction of a northbound lane is required, and the general provision 12 is not justified. The requirement shall be removed from parcel one only. Can you explain to me exactly what we're talking about here, what is not being required, and
Well, what they requested, and the information about a low traffic thing was how it was presented by the applicant's agent. But the original CUP required that there be guarantee of additional improvements to 127th Street, clear up to essentially Camden Chase. And what they're asking for is that the additional improvements for 127th Street not be necessarily guaranteed as a condition of the CUP. That's what they're asking to waive. And we got comments from traffic, they were okay with that.
was the original requirements for a lane all the way down to 127th Street North, or was it just
Well, the original
a
CUP,
turn lane?
yeah, if you go back to the CUP drawing, it talked about improvements. It said to the north line of the parcel, which would be essentially in this case to Camden Chase, yeah.
All the way back to 127th Street North to that?
Well, all the parcels in question, yeah, that condition would be a requirement for additional lane on 127th Street from 21st Street up to Camden Chase.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Lowell.
So traffic had the understanding that the 127th was going to be the only entrance that was not a fire entrance.
Yes.
Questions for staff? Seeing none, owner or applicant?
Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Greif with PEC, agent for the applicant. We also have the owner here. I'd like to give you a brief overview of the extensive conversations we've had with both neighborhoods, the Fairmont on the west and the Hawthorne on the east, and some amendments to staff report and staff comment and understanding of the CUP. Briefly, Jerry's going to just give you an overview really quick of the company and what they're proposing, and then I'm going to go through each of those individually and address and clarify a lot of the confusion that's there. So let me put this.
Hello, my name is Jerry Hill. I'm with Calamar Inc. Calamar is the applicant. Calamar is a company headquartered in Wheatfield, New York, which is just about 20 minutes from Niagara Falls, outside of Buffalo. The company's about 30 years old. We have senior living communities, about 30 communities scattered across the country. I'm the Midwest Development Director. In the Midwest, we have 3 communities operating in Omaha, 2 in Des Moines, 3 operating right now in the Kansas City area, 1 in Olathe, 1 in Kansas City, and 1 in Independence. And then we have 1 under development in Shawnee and in Blue Springs. We build, own, and operate these. We're not a company that comes in and builds and fills it and flips like a lot of people are doing nowadays in senior housing. We've never sold a community in all the time we've been building them. So it matters to us what we build and how we do it. We have had Tim Buchanan, who's the seller in the property. We've had extensive conversations with him, and as was said, with the neighbors, and had a large neighborhood meeting, and then a lot of additional comments before and after that. And so we have made a number of adjustments reflecting those. We're very concerned that we want to fit in. We want to be a good neighbor. We think it's a good buffer, this land, of the uses that could go on this land under the current plan. This is a good buffer between residential and the commercial that could go there. Our traffic counts are much lower than ordinarily would be. Let me give you just a brief look at the project. I'll be glad to answer more questions. It will be 132 units. It will be purely independent living. There won't be medical. There won't be meals. The facility will have lots of amenities. It will have a lounge, a library, community room, a movie theater, a game room, a yoga room, workout rooms, computer labs, those kinds of things for the residents to use. To give an idea of who lives in our communities, our typical user, we have older and younger and male and couples, but our typical user would be a 72-year-old single woman. About 60 to 65% of the people that move into our community sell a house in order to move in, and they virtually all come within 10 to 15 miles of the community. So that kind of gives you a feel of who's moving in. People that live in the area, no longer want to maintain a house, but want to stay close to their church, their doctors, their friends, their neighbors, and those. And our facilities will be about 35% full by the time construction is complete in pre-leasing. And in 8 to 12 months after that, we'll be 100% full. And after that, we'll have a wait list, because people don't generally move out unless they need a higher level of care. And we always have people that are now wanting to move in because they know somebody that lives in the community. We don't have a lot of the issues that other multifamily has. Traffic, noise, trash, all of those things are much, much less than typical. Only about 80% of our residents will even own a car. So we think we have been very responsive. We want to continue to be as we go through this process with the neighbors, and become the best use on this corner lot by this great neighborhood. This development and this zoning that's on this that allows for this use predates the subdivisions that were built, but they were all developed, I think, by Tim and his company. So I think he envisioned some kind of a buffer there, and I think he's worked to prevent some other things from going in on that corner that would be less of a buffer than what this is. So I'll be glad to answer questions, but I'll let the expert talk about the details.
Thanks, Jerry. So we'll quickly kind of run through these. The first, obviously, is that turn lane. Dave showed you the overall CUP. That language actually specifies to the farthest north drive. So there'd be about a 500 to 600 foot gap from Camden Chase to where that turn lane would be. It would be a widening of just an east turn lane. It's a dedicated turn lane. So with that, we pulled the existing traffic counts. These were taken in 2014 by the city of Wichita. This is public information that we found. I know that there's a major traffic concern out here. Magdalene brings in a number of students every single day. This was the major concern from our public information meeting with the Hawthorne Edition last week. They're all single dropped off because there's no busing system for the Catholic school. We acknowledge that. Our users, based on the International Traffic Engineering Manual, states that we'll have 454 trips per day on a peak day. Adding 454 cars to these kind of traffic volumes is the justification for the request of removing that turn lane requirement. We would stand for negotiations with traffic if that needed to happen, if we needed to add a temporary lane. Our concern is it would actually add more traffic issue, would bottleneck those things. So from our understanding and from our perspective of it, the number of users just doesn't bring enough to require that. This is a revised site plan. So as we discussed with fire, with the neighborhood, emergency access only is our intent. As you see in the northeast corner, this drive would be a concrete drive approach as is required. These would actually be grass bricks that are delineated either side so that the 26-foot wide drive is met so that the fire department can access it. It would be gated, lock and key. They would bust it when they need to come in and regate, and the Calamar would have to fix that once it was done. But that would push all traffic to the 127th Street. This is the only opening that is platted. So this is kind of our ideal revised. As you can see, we've even shifted this as far east as we can so that the line of sight is clear. The renderings that you have in front of you are a before and after from Peckham to the building. So you can see there's an existing berm, there's some existing trees. Our intent is to add to that to fulfill more trees within that area. Oop, that's parking, we'll go back. We'll go forward. Our intent is to fill this in more. We'd like to create a natural buffer to enhance that natural buffer and the screening that's there. So the view from the neighbors is just a roof line and what they have to see in between. But we want to clean that up and keep it as nice and, as Jerry mentioned, as fitting into the neighborhood as we possibly can. The back side of your sheet is the updated rendering. What was included in staff report was what was best available at the time. Through further discussions with the neighborhood, it will be all stone on all three levels. The top level, on the corners, on the top level, will be some hardy board siding that will be painted to match. The white will go away. That doesn't match the neighborhood aesthetics. So our intent on the architectural controls is to fit current earth tone requirements, but to kind of add to it to fit the Hawthorne the best we can. The next thing I really want to address is the parking requirement. So we are asking for a parking reduction. As Jerry mentioned, 80% of residents will have a vehicle, all the others won't. This is the site in Kansas City, Missouri, is an 85% occupied site. There are 164 stalls, and there's 41 of them in use. It's 25%. That's a lot more pavement and a lot more lighting. Other municipalities have a specific parking ratio for elderly living. The city of Wichita doesn't have that at this time. So our intent is to reduce that down to more applicably fit the neighbors, the residents. As it's currently listed, we would have 107 stalls. On the site plan we're showing 148 if you include the garages. So we're still exceeding our own request, but that is the reason for that reduction. Coming back to this, our current request is a 30-foot access drive as depicted on a site layout. We would request that this be a 30 to 40-foot opening. The access control was completely vacated on Camden Chase, which is why we have to amend the CUP. We have everyone in agreement to this, but if we have to tweak it a little bit, we'd like to be able to have that flexibility. So the 40-foot allows us to have that flexibility there. Again, going back, this is the rendering, this is our intent. This is an actual 3D model of the structure at the appropriate elevation as is currently designed. So this is what they will see when construction is over. To give you a view from Lindsay, the idea of the top of the apartment building and the top of the existing berm, there's a lot of natural screening. We would be open to adding additional landscaping on the east side of the site if we needed to continue that. Both of these things are to help understand the masonry wall requirement currently listed. This is our request to remove that. I officially have 2 seconds, sorry. But all in all, we're in agreement with staff comment. The one concern that we have, the only thing that we are not in agreement with is the new sidewalk that is requested on Camden Chase. And the only reason we have a concern with that is because we would have to level out a number of those berms and remove trees to put a sidewalk in. We would like to have site connectivity and connect that sidewalk into the existing sidewalk that's on the north side. Otherwise, we're in full agreement with staff comment. There's more we could see if you needed.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant or agent?
Yeah.
Foster?
Where you've altered your access, it's now going off the southwest corner there.
Northwest, excuse me, sorry, the main access onto 127th?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Please describe how that access will be improved. How wide are the lanes going to be? And I'm thinking in terms of access to the church, just what's going to be the scenario at that juncture there?
So that has not yet been finalized. The access opening that we have is 150-foot opening. So the maximum that's allowed by traffic engineering is a 30-foot opening. I would assume that we will utilize that to the best of our ability and taper down. This is just to give you a general concept of where that drive will end up being. But we will make that as traffic safe as possible, especially in discussions with Dr. Kuhn.
And how many lanes will there end up being for through traffic on 127th itself to allow for turning into the church and so forth?
There are currently 2 lanes. That is what will remain, assuming the amendment is approved. Right now, the CUP requires that the east lane, that there be an east lane added from 127th Street south to this drive approach. Not all the way to Camden Chase, just to this drive approach.
Second question would be, if you go to your depiction there, the model looking south, there we go. One thing you always got to keep in mind is you're going to have 6 to 7 months. Some of that's deciduous plant material. I would consider a suggestion that needs to have a wall behind it to provide constant screening, year-round screening, or there be a requirement for major viewpoints into this that it would be an evergreen barrier.
Evergreen.
And that may occur on the east side, and especially at this point. This is a very important viewpoint there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We concur with that. If you look at the berm now, it's about 2/3 evergreen. We would add to that, and certainly at this point, we're trying to be very sensitive to this street. That's why the drive's moved all the way down, and while these aren't shown as evergreen on this, we would anticipate putting as large of evergreen trees as we can right there from early on, plus some flowering and those kinds of things that look good year-round. But we share that concern, and one of the reasons we didn't want the drive onto Camden, that drive onto Camden Chase originally was only because of fire. We don't need a second drive. And so by moving it down, we avoid even the turning out of the street to go back to 127th. You won't see into the property with the drive. But that's our intent. The staff has to, of course, approve our landscaping plan, as does the developer. And I think they're all going to hold our feet to the fire on that. But we picked this site because we love this location in this neighborhood, and so that's one reason we're hesitant on the sidewalk, is we don't want to mess up what's already there. We've got very mature trees. We don't want to have to cut those down. We want to just add to them.
Richardson?
Got 2 or 3 questions.
Sure.
Can you put the aerial back up and help us understand where this entrance off 127th will be vis-a-vis the one for the north end for the school there?
So it won't perfectly line up because of the current access controls. So the south 50 feet of this lot is the one access opening. So it will be south of the school drive.
Is there a way to make those line up? That's going to be a real safety hazard if we can't get those to line up. I mean, that really needs to line up with that driveway across the street.
That would require, my understanding is that would require a separate vacation case to vacate access control onto 127th Street and shift that.
Well, I think we can probably hear that case, not here, but there is, as you well know, a provision to do that. We're talking about elderly drivers here fighting with school traffic with an offset entrance doesn't make any sense to me at all. I think what you're proposing is fine, except we really need to make it line up with that. I live in the neighborhood about a half a mile away, and I can tell you that there's some really determined women here when it comes time to pick up kids.
And I would probably fight with the folks that are going to know when that's happening, and they're not going to be driving either.
Yeah, and a few men. But my point here is that you got elderly drivers who need to have as much help as possible. And, you know, frankly, that help would be if they could come in off of Camden Chase. I understand why they're not, but we really need to have that, that line up. Number two, with regards to the elimination of the wall on the east side there, are you okay with the comments that the staff has made to put garages along there? And will you commit to a certain number of garages, like
So
15 or 18 or whatever it takes to screen that?
what I would offer to you, and I didn't explain this very well, I apologize. Each of these stalls that has a line across the front of it, those are garages. So these are intended to be garages. We have the ability also to add additional screening there as needed.
How many garages are there?
Approximately 20, a little less.
I would
think.
just like to have you commit, and we put that in our minutes, that you're going to do, you know, 18 or more garages so that we absolutely have the screening there.
Yep.
Which will work actually better than, you know, better than a wall. My concern about the wall is getting into the plant material that's already along there.
Correct.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
You've got,
Do that. Number three, you're allowed almost 900 square feet of signs because of the running footage. Are you willing to reduce that to some number that says 300 square feet or whatever you need for a sign? And I'm just looking down the road here in case this changes use or whatever. You don't need 900 square feet of signs. And
sign would be about as big as this table.
okay, so, you know, you give us a number that we could consider here as a part of this action. If we approve it, I'd like to have some reduction in the size of the sign. If we,
As I,
if,
once we get full, we can stop marking.
yeah, okay, all right.
Lowell, I think I counted 17. Are you okay?
Yeah,
17
17, whatever, just so we commit to a number of garages there. And you're not showing any cross-lot access easement to lot number 2 to the north, is that right? Okay. Well, I think that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that. And since there's no entrance onto Camden Chase, that's kind of a moot point. Now, I was concerned about that earlier. If there was an entrance onto Camden Chase and you have cross-lot from what may well be a fairly
Dillon's.
dense.
Yeah.
We don't want to shortcut to Camden Chase. We think we've eliminated that now, so that takes care of my questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Foster?
What documentation do you use to ensure that this would remain a senior-type facility?
You don't have here, some of our cities we go into have a senior housing classification for zoning. You don't have that. So, I mean, we design it and we do it.
Get back to the mic.
On the mic.
I'm sorry. We're fine for you to require that. I mean, there's no other use this building could go to. It's designed for this use.
I don't
And
think-
so
I
we
don't
have
think we have
sometimes
that.
where they didn't even have a requirement, we have said that there be a requirement that it remain senior housing.
I believe, Mr. Foster, I believe the seller could sign a restrictive covenant, would be a legally binding and recordable document that this use always be that. But we'd have to look into that. I don't know. I don't believe that this governing body can require, we can try, and you can make it a recommendation that the seller and the buyer make that a part of their negotiation and a part of the construction of this, but I don't believe there's any other way at this time.
You mentioned sidewalk getting revised or eliminated. Where would that be?
So right now, there's an existing sidewalk. Sorry, there's an existing sidewalk where this pedestrian is. He's photoshopped in there, but you can see the wheelchair ramp here. It's on the north side of Camden Chase. So right now we're standing on Peckham, looking south towards the site. There's an existing sidewalk that runs east-west on the north side of Camden Chase. The staff report requires that a sidewalk be constructed on the south side of Camden Chase through this bermed area. Our request is that that would be eliminated as a requirement, and we would provide access from internal site circulation to this existing walk across the road. But that would be the extent of additional sidewalk on Camden Chase.
We don't want to have to remove trees or berm, and we also don't want to encourage parking.
Why don't you
We're
put the
afraid that
aerial, put the
Might
aerial up?
encourage parking from the church or something if there's a sidewalk there.
Now show them on there where it is.
So the existing sidewalk you can see here, just above the yellow line, there's existing sidewalk that takes you all the way into the Hawthorne. Our intent would be, again, to have site circulation within internal, and then one opening to get you safely across the street so you could walk the neighborhood as well.
Up there.
How much room do you have on the south side there for the additional landscaping and berming? Do you know?
I believe there's an existing utility easement, so we are just north of the utility easement. There's an existing 10-foot utility easement, so we are 10 foot north of that south property line right now.
Go back to your site plan.
There it is, yeah. So in here, so this furthest east end where those garages are, those are 10-foot offset, and the rest of it right now is square with Camden Chase.
On the north side there?
Oh,
there's
this on this end?
existing berm up there?
Correct. Now, keep in mind that existing berm straddles this property line. So part of it is out in road right of way and part of it is on our parcel.
About how much room do you have between the base of that berm and your drive along the parking there?
And this parking here, it varies. We get as close as, I believe, 8 foot here, 8 to 10 foot, as far as 20 foot. 20 to even potentially 30 through this curve.
But that's the right of way, not the pavement.
Correct. Correct. That's the property line, not the pavement. The pavement is inset even further.
About 15 feet there.
Green?
Yes, you mentioned a request to have the parking reduced, and I fully appreciate the number of drivers that you probably wouldn't have with it being a senior living center. Have you also factored in the visitors to those seniors with your parking study to determine if you will have enough parking to accommodate both those seniors that are drivable and those visitors that would be coming to see them?
We've done that, and of course, we've done enough of these communities that we have a sense of that, especially here in the Midwest, which driving patterns are a little different here than in the Northeast where we have communities. But our main goal is to not have a bunch of empty asphalt and not to have a bunch of extra parking lot lights. And we obviously don't want to be underparked, and there's land here, we could put more parking. If we put more parking, it's going to sit there empty and it's going to be lit at night, and I think that's not good for it's not good for anybody to do that. But we're very comfortable with the amount of parking on this. There will still be a lot of empty spaces all the time in this building because all these garages will be full, and so you've got 48 of the people that have cars that will have them in the garage. But we're confident with the amount of parking.
Any other questions? Mr. Richardson? You okay?
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll open it up for comment. I got that right? Yep, yes, yep. Wait, that 2 minutes, I think. We got 3 now. You have 3 minutes. State your name and address.
Thank you. May it please the commission. My name is Avery Ellefson. I'm one of the residents who lives just over on Peckham Court. So a lot of the vantage points you're talking about would be something that we would see regularly. I do appreciate the developer and the owner. They did have a nice meeting with us and shared a lot of things. In my experience, it's always great to hope for the best, plan for the worst. I'll take the items kind of in their enumerated order. When it comes to the traffic, I think as many people, and I appreciate the commission bringing it to everybody's attention, you have the school, you have obviously children, you have mass on Sundays. For anybody who lives in the neighborhood, you also know just south of that, they're expanding the street on 127th, just south of 21st. So there's growth there. Just to the north on 127th, they're now finishing or working on that road as well. So while I think it's very optimistic to say it's not a high traffic area, and especially at certain times of day. So in terms of the first issue about the extra lane, obviously I appreciate that it would come at some additional cost. However, I think under the circumstances, again, with all the children, even the children in our own community, our kids, people walking dogs, that kind of thing, I just don't see it being an unreasonable request to stay on the path with that additional lane. The secondary access point, I think that's been addressed, although I did have one question that I guess wasn't made clear to us. We would concur in not having the sidewalk, however, it was never, I guess, conveyed, or maybe I just missed it, that there would be some sort of access point for walking through the neighborhood. I mean, if the berm and the brush and the trees or the wall, as was originally in the regulations, well, that wouldn't be happening. So why are we talking about an access and an additional sidewalk at this juncture, especially if that's closed off for fire and emergency vehicles only? Again, I think some people have brought up the very valid concern about the parking, the issue. Again, with, I think it was 130 units. I don't know how it is for the rest of Wichita, but I know in my household, there's at least 2 cars. My wife and I both work. The age group we're talking about, I understand there's a kind of expected demographic, but within the 55, 65, I think it's completely expectable that they would each have a car. So I think we do have some concerns there, and I think that the requirement was there for good purpose. I think the owner, and I appreciate again his time working with the developer in terms of the aesthetics. However, one of the other issues, I believe I'm going to take it one step out of order here, the 40 feet. Again, these 3 things tying together, I know there was an additional original requirement for the wall. There's been some suggestion and intention about there being additional trees, the evergreens. I think Commissioner Warren brought that up. We'd like to have that in writing. I mean, if it, you know, we're going to move forward, we'd like to know for sure what's going to happen. I think it was requested at the homeowners meeting about maybe giving us a drawing, a kind of a layout, a landscaping plan, what they plan to do before just agreeing to say ixnay with the wall. So that would be our other concern. And then, let's see here. I believe that's it, but I know also one of my fellow homeowners also had some concerns, so I will defer to them or any questions.
Any questions for the speaker?
Yeah, I got one. Good.
Mr. Warren?
Just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Assuming this were to go through, you're fine with the elimination of the sidewalk?
Yes.
Along the north, okay.
Yes, yes, I do think right now, as it stands, you know, obviously a lot of residents and their children walk on the northern sidewalk. And actually, if I didn't bring it up, or maybe I did, the height restriction was another concern. That kind of ties in with the wall. I know the original requirement was for, I believe it was 30 or 35 feet. We do believe that, again, to function and kind of blend in with the neighborhood, we would ask that if they can adhere to that height requirement as much as possible, again, without having specifics about exactly what the trees or the wall or what those other things would look like. Again, the ambiance of the neighborhood, the original thoughts on the layout, I think would be important as well.
So help me understand here. Let's just say that your children's grandparents lived here and you'd like for them to walk to your house. How would you propose they do that?
If they lived in the development, and I would assume.
Please use the mouse.
You have to use the mouth. What I heard you saying is you want to close that pedestrian access, right?
Well, and my understanding is, from what's been suggested, it's going to be closed anyway. There wouldn't be an access. It was either going to be the berm, the brush, the trees, or the wall.
We're just talking about pedestrians, not vehicles.
Yeah,
What I heard you say is you did not want a pedestrian access out of this area. Is that right? And so my question would be, if your children's grandparents live there and you would like them to walk to your house, how would they do that?
It's a valid point. I guess the understanding would be north on 127th over to the north side of Camden Chase.
So they'd need to cross to the west side of 127th.
Yes.
With the school traffic.
I agree. And
walk north, then cross 127th again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
You wanted the inclusion of the third lane, am I right?
Yes.
Next speaker?
Thank you. Appreciate the commission's time.
My name's Keith Wagner. I live at 2409 North Peckham.
Sir? Yeah.
Okay. I don't have too many problems with the development. I am concerned about the berm that's there with the landscaping, that it does stay. And they've talked about adding additional. They said they want to block our entrance there at into Peckham, which is fine, but I want to see some 6-inch trees or 4-inch trees or something. That a 2-inch tree ain't going to work for me because I'm not going to be around when that thing's big. But a sidewalk for crossing into our neighborhood, you know, I think you've got a point, guys, what you said there. I would suggest right here. That's my suggestion. I am kind of concerned about the bottleneck with the 2 drives across each other from the school. I understand them not wanting to put a turning lane in because it is expensive, but you know, you guys you had a traffic count from 14, which I don't think that development to the north was probably just getting started in 14. So I'm sure that traffic count has increased since then. At Peckham and Camden Chase, from the renderings I seen, and off my calculations, I calculated that roof line at 46 feet off the Camden Chase and Peckham. I brought that up in our meeting at the church, and they said they would adhere to 35 feet, which I still want to see. I'm still wondering how that's going to happen. So I personally think the buildings would be probably fit good. It's just there's still some questions in my mind about what's going to be the end result. So that's about all I got to say. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Harrison. I live at 2445 North Peckham Court, just across the street from Keith and down the street from Avery. And I'm in pretty much agreement too. I think it's probably better that we have this type of a building and a community next to us. There'd be a lot of other choices of things that could be in there, and this is probably one of the better choices that could be there. I do have still a concern about the traffic, and Keith made a good point about 2014, that was quite a while back. And I don't know if you're all aware of the 2 churches that are in our neighborhood. There is both Magdalene and the New Spring Church. The New Spring Church is west of Magdalene, and it has entrances in and off of 21st Street, but for some reason, I don't know how, and I've never really looked, but they also exit out the back side of that church onto 127th. And at 5:30, 6 o'clock Saturday night, Sunday mornings, we have both Magdalene and that church all exiting off 127th. And quite often, it's very difficult to make a left turn out of Camden Chase out onto 127th. Now, maybe the answer is not figure out why that traffic's coming out of the backside of New Spring through that other neighborhood. I don't know why. There is on the map. Don't you have a map of that bigger area?
Jim's got it.
Exit that they open. It's an emergency exit that they open to help alleviate the traffic onto 21st.
Okay, so, does this pointer work over here? Yeah. So somehow they're coming out the backside through here. Like I said, there's an emergency exit. I don't quite understand why an emergency exit has to be used for everybody leaving church. I know they're in a hurry, but maybe that might be part of something that could be done. Also, 127th south of 21st Street is being widened right now to 3 lanes, so it's going to have a center lane through it. And maybe that's a proposal at some point that should be thought about with all these churches, the housing units going in, the houses that are now being built to the north of us, and along with that, whatever gets sold on the property just to the south of where this housing unit is. So, for right now, we don't know what's going in there. We're assuming that you'll sell something. I'm sure you'd like to. There's some other concerns about the traffic along with that. And just back, I also agree with the sidewalk on the south side. I don't think there's a lot of room there. The sidewalk on the north side is wide. There's plenty of room for it. Plus, if you put that sidewalk, it would stop right here and not continue, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to put one there, I don't think. I'm with Keith and Avery about more trees, evergreens, the size of the trees. There was some discussion maybe about planting some higher grasses in there to help block it. That might be a good way to do it now. They mow it short. If you walk along 21st Street, just east of our property, there is a lot of those higher grasses, and that works well. That's it. Thank you.
Dale, I understand that this will have to go through plating, right? It's already platted? Is there a reserve along there for this actually turning into 3 lanes at some point in time?
Are you talking about 127th Street? There is enough right-of-way currently dedicated that it could be widened in the future. It's not in the 10-year CIP right now. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's already platted, and the right-of-way exists. Traffic did not require any further guarantee of improvements. They're not asking for additional right-of-way. So there's no other platting actions that are, and the language that were in the recommendation is just to carry over what's already within the CUP, and was talking about the improvements, and the intent there was to just carry over the existing guarantees that are already of record for additional improvements in the future. And when we sent this to traffic engineering, they came back and said, we have no other changes to anything. We're fine.
Mr. Green?
Dave, do you know what that half-street right-of-way is from 21st Street north to Camden Chase and further on? Well, I guess, yeah, through that platted area. What is that half-street
That
right-of-way?
appears to be 60 feet of half-street right-of-way.
Yeah, there's plenty of room, though, then.
And that's reading it from, that's reading right here.
Right.
It's even wider as you get closer to 21st Street.
We let our speaker get away. Was there any questions for him? Okay. Next speaker. Seeing,
My name is Victoria Krieger, and I live at 2533 North Loch Lomond Court, and they wanted us to show you, but the plot's not there, so I can't really do that.
Will that help?
And I live in a neighborhood that's way back in here, and we are residents of the Hawthorne and have been for some time. Is this the best thing for this facility? Probably. Better than a box store. Do we appreciate Tim not putting that there? Absolutely. The biggest concern that we have, even living back in the neighborhood, is the traffic. My mother-in-law was going to be their first resident, but she went there this weekend and said absolutely not. No, and I knew what her response would be to my son, her son. She can't turn right. She can't turn right out of there and be able to get to 21st Street. She can't get a protected turn. If she has to turn right, she's going to have to go all the way to 127th, all the way to 37, around. She only makes right turns. She's only 76 years old. But she said there's no way in hell she's going to cross 127th at school time. When she comes to do stuff with our kids at 3 o'clock and we don't even go to Magdalene, she comes to our house at 2 o'clock to avoid the traffic. So I do think for the elderly community, you guys have, I mean, is it the developer's process? No, but we have a huge issue here. It's scary. So that's what, do we want this? I mean, yes, they have been great to work with. I think so, but I think the bigger issue is the 127th property for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the,
What's your suggestion?
We got to do something. This is 2 lanes of traffic. These elderly people, how are they going to get across this traffic for one? They say they'll come in the daytime and all of that. But there's just, let me tell you, I take it at my own risk, my own life when I go down there. I hardly ever enter 127th. I will go 21st and the long way around. This is usually quicker to get in, but the long way around because you do not enter that area. A gentleman says he lives there. He'll tell you, you can't go on this part. You might as well enter with your own risk. Our teenage drivers, we do not let them drive 127th. They have to come out to 21st. Especially during the high peak times.
any other questions for the speaker? Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Of course we do.
Hi, I'm Bill Martin, and resident is 2406 North Peckham Street, and that is, let's see, right there. So all those views you were seeing was just to the north of our house looking in there. And I would say, first off, Tim is a personal friend, and has taken great pride in this community. The street I live on is named after his mother-in-law. So. And the desire to keep the property and very, I don't know, the aesthetics of it to be incredibly nice, the nature element of it to be in that line has been consistent throughout even early stages of development. We moved to the property in 2015-16 range, and I would agree with everybody that's made this comment about 127th traffic. And I'm not sure the answer on this, and traffic counts from 2014 I think are bogus. So you need to take a look at where that is today because of development to the north and just the nature of the traffic flow because of kind of that school and all being dropped off. I think that's an important element. Don't know the solution, but I think the commission needs to definitely take that into consideration. Another thing on the amendments, amendment number 6, and this is as a homeowner making the decision to purchase knowing that this is for commercial property. One of the things that I took benefit, I guess, or knowledge in is a couple things. One is the height restriction. So my house is probably affected as much as anybody else from that particular view. That view that you were looking at a few slides back is my view. And so I think for one thing, looking at, as the comments have been made about senior housing, I completely agree. It's a nice buffer. I sincerely appreciate, again, Tim and the efforts that you have worked with to make sure the aesthetics of the building are consistent with the rest. And I would want to make sure there's some sort of contractual agreement that takes place. But I also have seen, go to Tallgrass, for example, and look at the assisted living facility that's there. It's one story. So I understand in making a purchase decision regarding the height of a property and the vantage point where I'm sitting from is an important element to that, to extend it up higher and even debate about the exact height of where that is, I think is something that is worth consideration. 2-story. Again, it's probably not in the developer's best interest to make a 2-story building, but clearly that would fall within the parameters of the existing plat that's a part of this. The second thing that I would say related to that is the footprint. So there's a footprint behind this of expansion, I think, to 140,000 square feet. And again, just density of the area, I would encourage the group to consider that. As I was thinking about these things, those would be, and one last comment. I've debated and thought I didn't get the opportunity to go to the session that I appreciated the developer and Tim and others meeting with the community. Yep, okay. It was along that barrier. And I think the more I thought about it, maybe the wall would have clearly blocked if it had been higher or at least partially blocked. But the trouble I had with that picture was around, it was deciduous trees, most of that. And so I think a requirement need to be placed, if it's a natural barrier, to put in large evergreen trees to screen and block from that place. So those are just a few comments, but again, the developer, the land seller have been very good to work with in this process, and appreciate the commission taking my comments into consideration.
Any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name is Yasser Munir. I'm the resident of Hawthorne on 13215 East Main Skate Circle. It's kind of right about like quarter mile in around this area. I will be echoing some of the comments that I already made. Traffic. My son goes to a daycare just across the 21st here. I cannot take him during the certain time of the days when the school is in session here. It's even kind of, hard to get onto this road and go anywhere. I mean, and adding a facility here, it's gonna be, even adding more traffic, that's already kind of troubling at certain time of the day. The parking, this is a 132 unit kind of proposed development with 148 stalls, about 1.1 parking spaces. With no restrictions on 55-year kind of, residents. I mean, what's the guarantee that it's not going to be requiring more parking spots, which are already very low? This age group, 55-year-old, I mean, having folks, more than one car, this is already kind of, not meeting, I mean, that's a sense I have, not meeting the requirements. The illustration that was shown, we raised this question before, I mean, kind of not occupying the whole parking spot. I mean, they seem like they were, taken during the day. The other illustration that was shown from like a similar property at nighttime, I mean, 80% occupancy, 80% parking spot. That just does not seem realistic that 132 units with the residents in there, they will not be utilizing that 148 kind of, parking spots. That's the only comments I have.
Questions? I just had a comment. I may be naive, but it seems if the development does not have enough parking, the developer, in order to keep it a progressive community, would add additional space, or additional parking space in the future. That'd just be my observation. May not happen. Yes.
I'd say also with the increased parking lot, you have additional lights that will bleed over into the neighborhoods also, and so that's an increase,
Okay, next speaker.
I didn't know if there's any other homeowners that wanted to speak.
Well,
Thank you. I'm Brett Webb. I'm a resident of Hawthorne at 2534 North Rosemont Court. Apologize if I didn't sign up to speak, but if I could just real briefly. The only comment, just a couple comments I wanted to make. I mean, I think a lot of the homeowners have already raised the concerns. I've been a resident of Hawthorne for a little over 12 years. I've attended homeowners association meetings religiously for 12 years. They're pretty sleepy affairs with maybe 4 or 5 people showing up at most. When the homeowners were nice enough to get a meeting with the developer, that was not a sleepy affair. I just want to share with the commission, there were dozens of residents who I've never even seen step out of their homes before. They came to this meeting, and there were 2 solid hours of intense questioning. There is significant concern within the neighborhood of the development. And I can also appreciate that there could be worse things go on the property. So I definitely grant that there might be something worse than this. I think the concern, if I had to summarize it in just a couple areas, is the building too large and too dense for the size of the property? And this is where we really hope that this commission would take a lot of care in making sure that that's not the case, and that corners aren't being cut in terms of the aesthetics, in terms of commitments on landscaping that maybe never come about, things like that. I think there's concern. The neighborhood is very concerned. This is the first thing since the neighborhood was really developed that is probably really detrimental to the property values. And I think there's a widespread belief that this is detrimental to the property values in the neighborhood. It may still go forward because something's going to be there. But I think the concern, I just want to share that there is a significant concern within the Hawthorne neighborhood that this is done, if it's going to be done, that it's done right, and that this commission can help to make sure that corners aren't being cut and that commitments aren't being made that never come forward. Things like the height, I think, it's concerning to the neighborhood why you would waive the height requirement. The height requirement is there. It's been there for a long time. And why would you waive that? The developer should accommodate the height requirement. I think you all have heard the parking concern or the traffic concern now for some time. The traffic concern is real. To waive the requirement for a turn lane makes no sense to me why that would be the case, why you'd even consider not putting a turn lane in. So I think those are the concerns. Just want to share that there's a few people who made the effort to come out here today. There are a lot of people who aren't here today that share the same concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, is there anyone else that wants to speak on this issue before we get to the rebuttal? No, you'll be considered rebuttal.
That's what I thought.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, we are ready for a 2-minute rebuttal.
I'll take a minute. I'm Tim Buchanan. I represent 21st Growth LLC. We're the sellers of the property. We did have a robust meeting last week with the homeowners. I appreciate all the homeowners coming out and helping. The purchaser here has agreed to just about everything I've asked them to do on this property to amend it with the exterior of the property, the landscaping and things. Have been a very cooperative developer on the property, so I'm appreciative of that. I think there is a significant traffic issue on this part of town, not just 127th, but because of these schools. New Spring actually uses a fire-gated entrance into a residential neighborhood to exit church, which dumps most of their traffic out onto 127th Street. That could help alleviate part of this traffic issue. The height issue, I would point out that this property currently is zoned light commercial, and the height of this building is actually within the height restrictions as it's calculated by the planning staff. But this building sets back significantly farther than a commercial building would be allowed to sit on this property. It's because of the nature of the property, the parking wraps around it, rather than a commercial building that would be backed up to that north property line, which is why the wall was originally platted, or I think thought of by staff, was for the commercial. The footprint of the building was mentioned 140,000 square feet. The 140,000 square feet is all 3 floors added together. The footprint actually is less than the footprint that would be allowed for a commercial building. Did I leave anything out?
No, that's perfect.
Did you get it?
So that was going to be, those were the 2 comments I was going to address. The height restriction, we discussed with staff after our initial application that we misunderstood the calculation for the building height requirement, and we don't need an amendment to that, but we do, because of the 3 floors, need the increase in the max gross area. So that'd be all. That's all the time.
We got time? Okay.
Time would you like?
15
Your time,
I want to thank you for your consideration. We want to be good neighbors. I've offered to a number of people in the neighborhood. I will, as we go forward, we're early in the process to meet regularly about landscaping, about exterior, all those things, so that they are involved and we have their input, because that's important to us. We're going to be neighbors a long time if this goes forward. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Any questions in rebuttal? Mr.
Yeah, could
Green?
you, on the site map, show us where you are considering putting a sidewalk that would exit your property and yet give access to the property to the north?
I think we put a sidewalk.
You have to be at the mic, sir.
Sir?
Sir, you have to be at the mic. We're recording this.
I won't talk, I'll point.
Can you interpret?
I can interpret, you bet. So it has been the utmost, it's the most recent part of staff comment that we are just taking the opportunity to address. We have not had the time to discuss or to analyze or even to ask the property owners adjacent how that connectivity should work. Our big concern really was the east-west it just doesn't feel like a feasible option. Ideally, we would have connectivity to the rest of the neighborhood, but it's still something that could be determined either by this body or through further discussions with the property owners.
I have a comment.
Our preference would be to not break the berm, to be on either side of the berm.
Gotcha. Lowell.
Well, we're spending a lot of time and money throughout the city within what we call the core area to make it walkable and accessible. To not have pedestrian access into this neighborhood would be a real tragedy for people who need to get out and exercise. Their only choice will be to exercise in the commercial development when and if it gets developed. It makes no sense not to have pedestrians. There's sidewalks that go through that neighborhood. There's no reason to accept these people from the use of that sidewalk. That needs to have a connectivity. Makes absolutely no sense not to do that. If you don't want these people in your neighborhood, I don't know who you want. It's just insane.
Questions?
I've got a question for the owner.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
you own the land south of this, is that correct?
Yeah, we own the land with the exception of the hard corner. The hard corner has been sold, but we own the rest of the land.
Okay, and so it could be, if they needed more parking, that it could be amended to expand this request so they have more land on the south to allow more parking?
The current land, and I don't know how to drive this thing, but the current site plan and the current land that they're purchasing to set the building on the west side of the building, they have available land to add additional parking within the land that they're currently purchasing.
Okay, thank you.
That
answers my question.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll ask for guidance. Yeah, Mr. Warren.
Just comment, number one, I appreciate everybody coming out and speaking on the issue. You've obviously thought about it and had some really great comments, and I appreciate that. The fact that you recognize that there are other alternatives that may be worse, appreciate that. I think that the thing that I'm hearing over and over that's the most concerning, it has to do with the traffic. I agree with Mr. Richardson's comment in terms of lining up the exit. I think that's something that we need to, whatever motion we need to make, we need to figure out a way to improve that aspect. And then the other thing, in my mind, would be a decel lane. If there's that much traffic, the sooner we can get seniors off of that road to get into their neighborhood and allow that traffic not to be any worse would be the two things that I would say. Some other issues.
So where would you suggest the decel
Decel
start?
lane from coming on 127th, on the lane coming from the south to the north.
Starting where?
That would be traffic engineering as to how far back they would need to start that, but at least try to figure out how to get people going into this development off of 127th as soon as makes sense for traffic. I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer. They need to figure that out, but I want to get them off 127th as soon as we can to lessen the traffic problem from that standpoint, and then line up. And then with that, I'll make that a motion. We approve it per staff comments with changes of lining up the interest of the church and having traffic engineer make a recommendation on a decel lane.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Who was it? Mr. Foster, Mr. Johnson. Okay, discussion. Mr. Foster.
As we were taking comments and things, I noted 4 different conditions here, items that I think just need clarification relative to our discussion today. And Mr. Warren has addressed the major one there. Second one is item 6, which relates to the maximum gross floor area. I think we need a little guidance on that as to what would be appropriate, since we've learned that the 140,000 is probably strong. So that'd be one question I'd appreciate staff's help on. Second one would be item 14, which relates to architectural control. It's been stated the applicant would consider additional use of stone on, I believe it was the north facade, and I think that should be clarified and become part of that condition. Item number 15, Mr. Richardson had brought up the idea of limiting the square footage for signs. I think a number there with a recommendation from staff would be appropriate to be less than the 900 square feet. And then item number 17 would speak specifically to the landscape requirements, which would require careful consideration of evergreen plantings, especially as you're looking from Peckham to the south, and any areas along the east, especially for evergreen screening, or as staff might recommend. Those were some things I picked up during the discussion.
Does the motion maker accept those?
Well, I agree with the questions. There's not anything concrete in there. I think we need a number on the size of the sign in number 15. I think we need something more concrete on item number 14 and something a little more concrete on number 6. I'm open to amending my motion to include those issues as long as we got something that we're agreeing to.
And then we also had a recommendation to make the connectivity a requirement too.
That's already a part of
He
my
already
motion.
did that.
Okay, I'm
That's
sorry.
already a part of my
I
motion.
wonder if, Dave, could you put back the plat up there and show us where my concern here, and maybe the applicant's engineer can help here, show us where that entrance is now, if you can.
Currently, the entrance identified on the plat is,
Right,
the
and-
opening is
and
right here. It's not
where
all the
would
way to the
that-
south property line. It's offset a little bit to the north.
Where would that have to be? And maybe the engineer can help us to line up. Does it need to go farther north or farther south?
It appears it might need to be moved a little bit to the north, although you can't really tell from this aerial. Although you can see, here's the north entrance going into
What?
the church.
Yeah, maybe the engineer can answer that. Can you, ma'am, can you help us with that?
I would agree with staff that it's something that we would have to look at with an actual dimensioned drawing. At this time, since we don't have the plat from the west of where their access opening is, I can't tell you with an exact certainty that it's not already aligned. My understanding was they were slightly offset. If they're not, and the two access openings are there, then without any doubt, we will line those two drives up.
Well,
Whether or
yeah.
not we have to amend this current access opening, which is applicable to our lot, is the question.
I was just trying to make sure you could do it within the confines of this lot and didn't have to get into lot 2.
So based on,
The answer is yes to that.
there is a
Yeah.
gap, you'll see here, so there is, this dimension line is the 50-foot opening, and then the parcel line is further south. So yes, we should be okay.
You should be okay. All right.
Does the owner have a recommendation on size of a sign that they're willing to live with?
What's the size that's currently allowed?
For the developer.
400 square foot?
Well, they indicated, and you guys did, we've not run the hard numbers.
I'll amend my motion to 300 square foot for the signage.
Does the second accept that? Okay. And what was another hard and fast deal that we needed on Dave's suggestions?
What do you want, Dave?
I think the landscaping comment, just increased use of evergreen, especially as you're looking south from Peckham. Consideration for additional evergreen where there might be evergreen planting, where there might be gaps in the garages.
I would amend my motion to include such wording.
Johnson?
And then,
Okay.
I'm sorry. And the only other one, well, two others. One would be the extent of stone. The best I can say there is as described by the applicant. They did a good job of explaining how much stone they were talking about relative to the facade treatment.
Does the photo that she supplied, is that sufficient as the model?
It doesn't appear to have the stone that was described to us in terms of the full facade. It only has more embellishment, and there's more siding on that. Maybe the applicant could explain that to us.
What are you saying?
This one. This one.
Go over, Dave, right there.
Well, yeah, it's right on target.
Now, is this typical for all four sides? And this is typical for all four sides?
Would amend my motion to include additional brick or stone in line with the exhibit that they presented.
Mr. Johnson, accept that. Okay. Mr. Green, you want to pile on?
Yeah, I want to pile on. The other issue that Mr. Foster brought up was on item 6 of their requests. Does the motion identify the building height as being 40 feet or 35 feet?
Well, they said they didn't need a change, so we could strike that from there.
The CUP says that parcel 1 should have.
The current CUP puts a maximum height of 35 feet of structures.
I would make sure our motion limits to no more than 35 feet. Or leave it as existing code. No change.
Yes, sir.
And on the evergreens, one gentleman asked for the dimensions of the evergreens, excuse me, to be in 3 to 5 feet, more mature trees to be planted right now. Am I right?
Deciduous trees.
Yeah, I'm talking about the evergreens that we're gonna put.
We don't,
The current language within the recommendation requires a landscape plan to be submitted and approved. And and Dale, I'll refer to Dale a little bit, but historically, when those come in, we identified not only the species that are going in, but we have the ability to identify either the caliper or the size that it's.
Well, they have a minimum 2-inch caliper.
for deciduous trees, but for evergreens, it's usually a height,
Yeah, and
10 to 12, 12 to 14.
I'd leave that up to you whether you want to specify a height.
Mr. Florence?
I think staff, who reviews that plan?
Planning staff.
I'll defer to staff's recommendation.
Okay, I think we have a motion. Mr. Foster has something else. Oh, Mr. Foster.
Item 17 could be expanded at sizes recommended by staff to achieve the evergreen screening.
Okay. Mr. Daly?
Have we talked about parking yet? That's what I'm concerned with, because people that old have more doctor's appointments. They may have a car, but they can't drive at that particular time. So their car's going to be there. Maybe one of their family or somebody comes. Where are they going to park? So I think we need to discuss and have enough parking for family to come and visit. And is there anything that prohibits more than one person or one family living there that'll have multiple cars, like a caretaker relative for maybe just a short period of time? They come to live with them to take care of them medically for a month or so. Where can they park their car? So we need to discuss that.
My recommendation is the parking is adequate, so I'm not open to making any adjustments to that. And I don't think it's our place to talk about who can stay, and, I mean, that's within their rules. That's outside of our purview.
That's what I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, we can't tell them that.
I'm comfortable with the parking. They've been doing these for 30 years. They seem to know their product pretty darn good, and they've got a pretty successful record. I'm okay with the way it is.
I just wanted some discussion on it. And now, did we talk about the sidewalk that went out,
Yeah,
uh,
twice.
that's in there. So, okay, so we have a way so they could get out to the north part there. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Well, the sidewalk is allowed right now. The only reason it wouldn't allow one is if we prohibit it, number one. Number two, on the parking, I visited a friend of mine who lives in an Oxford facility on the west side of town at 29th and Mays. That building is 50 to 60% full. I was there in the middle of the day after lunch, and there were literally probably a dozen cars in that parking lot. It's amazing how many cars they don't have, and I really think this is plenty of parking here, and they're not going to rent them if there's not enough spaces, and they've got room to add spaces if they need to. So
we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
No, wait a minute.
Yeah.
On the sidewalks, on the north side of what Camden Drive is, they have to put a sidewalk there, or they don't have?
There's one there.
There's already, there's,
On the north side.
Okay, on their south side.
One on the south side.
They what?
We're not requiring one on the south side.
Good, okay. But do we have access out to that
yes.
from the north side of?
Yes.
Okay.
That was in the
That's
original
what I
motion.
wanted to be sure.
I missed it too, but
I
it
did.
it was there. There's some way to do that.
Prohibited, it's allowed.
I think the important thing with respect to the sidewalk, at least my take is, we're talking about condition number 19, which talks about pedestrian walk system internally. And the language suggested was, as recommended by Mr. Knable, to add in the issue about putting an additional sidewalk along Camden Chase. They're asking that be removed, but within that plan that's got to be approved would be the idea of the connectivity from this parcel to the sidewalks that exist on the north side. So you're talking about some kind of a dedicated walk across Camden Chase. The recommendation coming from the applicant is one at the very east end, which would cross Camden Chase to get to the north side here, and also possibly one along 127th Street.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I'll make sure that my motion does eliminate the need for adding sidewalk along, a new sidewalk on the south side of Camden Chase.
Okay,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
You agree with that? Okay. Motion and second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, 11-0. All right, next item is item 6, and I think that one only had a question.
That was my understanding as well. I would be happy to answer it.
Whoever had the question, could you come forward and state that?
Hear the case.
Someone in the audience on the nightclub 00022 had one talk, and Mr. Foster thought it was somebody that was in support of it. And is there anyone who wants to say anything about that? Seeing none, we'll have a motion on.
Move we approve item number 6.
I can.
Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All right, opposed? Okay. 11-0. Our last item is, it's last item on the agenda before we get to the non-public hearing items, is case number 8, which is 00017, a county protective overlay. Who's presenting that one? Dave? Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to modify the protective overlay that was approved when this property was zoned to LC back in 2008. It's protective overlay 214. It's concerning the property at 15621 East 21st Street. You can see from the aerial, the location, county line is right here. Andover is just on the right side. And we're on 21st Street, just a little bit further east than the last case we just talked about. As I said, the property is currently zoned LC. It is in the county. It's not been annexed. It is not platted. You can see some of the other improvements that have, or other changes that have occurred on the property with some plats around it. We're talking about the parcel outlined in red. This aerial shows kind of most of the improvements that already exist on the property. There's more information you'll get on that as we move forward. The location as shown in the future land use plan. This too is an area along the 21st Street corridor that's identified for residential and employment mix. The picture taken internally, this is standing just south of the existing house, looking south, and you can see on the one barn south of the house. It's called the Firefly Farms. The logo is on that property, and this is just showing how the property internally looks now. I just turned 180 degrees. I'm looking north, back at the existing home that's on the property at this time. You can see kind of in the background here, that's 21st Street. I'm looking a little bit more northeast internally on the site. That you can see the propane tank and some of the other improvements on site. Another one of the buildings that's used for the overall operation that is occurring on site. That's a shot looking east, and you can see this is a primary parking area we'll talk about in a little bit. That's the area that is used for parking, and I know the applicant within the presentation she's got kind of shows that actually being heavily used, better than what it was the day when I was out there. But you can see here, they brought in gravel and have kind of made this, it's not just a dirt, it's a heavily gravelled parking area. Another one of the internal buildings, I'm looking south. There's a shot looking down that area devoted for parking, and the little fencing here, she told me these are 10 feet between these little poles, so it kind of gives you an idea of the number of spaces available at that location. This is an interior shot. You'll see that in her presentation that looks a little different than this. This was as it exists right now with a lot of storage. You'll see it with these tables up and other amenities on site when it's being used for the operation that she's got for her dinner facilities that she does. This is looking north across 21st Street to the north. And this is again standing by the edge of the house looking north. You can see this is the entrance that comes off of 21st that's on the west side of the house. The other entrance that's really more used is on the east side of the house. Again, in other interior shots, this is the entrance that's primarily used when they have events, which is between a farmer's market. They also have dinners out here. Ms. Garcia runs her own organic operation of growing on site, and I'll let her explain all that to you. And you can see the existing sign that's out along 21st Street currently at that location. This is a site that's looking west. We're kind of south of the house, and that's part of the improvement that's on the west side. This is another shot further to the north, and you can see the building on the property to the west, and according to what she says, those owners are currently operating a limousine service out of their property, and this is some of the vehicles that are out there. So this is 21st Street looking west from the entrance off of the applicant's property. So The primary thing that is driving this application is a requirement or request to remove some of the land use restrictions that were placed on this property back in 2008. I think in the background information, we gave you information that when this was rezoned, it was being driven to a great degree because the intention was for the property to be acquired and the improvements on site raised, and they were going to do commercial development. Shortly after all this happened, we had a real estate collapse, an economic collapse all over the country, all over the world, and that did not materialize. The owners retained the property. Ms. Garcia kind of got heavily involved in developing this for her organic farming operation and got into marketing that primarily, and that's what drove this request for these amendments, because it became known to county enforcement that the current restrictions did not allow the activity that's going on, so that's why we're asking for the amendment. I think the staff report outlines primarily, they were particularly encouraged or after the permitted use by right in the LC zoning for the farmers market in the county, and also for the event center to accommodate the occasional sale activity they have on site, as well as the ability to have other events on site where they market their activity and actually create dinners. And I'll let Leah talk about that in her presentation. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? Seeing none, owner or applicant, you have 10 minutes to present.
And there's
Good afternoon. Thanks to the commissioners for considering my request to amend protective overlay 214 on the current zoning on our property. My name is Leah Danner Garcia. My husband Ron Garcia and I own the property at 15615 East 21st Street North. Before I begin, I would like to thank Dale Miller, Senior Planner, Planning Department Director, Dave Yearout, Principal Planner, Kathy Morgan, Senior Planner, Kyle Kobe, Associate Planner, and Jim Schiffelbein, MAPD Graphics, for all their patience and help as I navigated this system. I've been told that my case is rather complicated, so I really appreciate all the time and energy they've put into their analysis and final recommendation. As I said, my name is Leah Danner Garcia, and I want to take a couple of minutes to introduce my farm business and how we're currently using the land and how we would like to use the land in the future. I'm a past president. My husband Ron and I, as I said, own the property at 15615 East 21st Street, but I am the owner-operator of the organic garden business named Firefly Farm. I'm a past president of the Wichita Area Sustainability Initiative. I sit on the advisory board for the ICT Food Council, a Food Circle, and the Food Policy Committee. I am the owner-operator of Firefly Farm, which is a quickly growing suburban agribusiness. We're averaging about 300% growth in our gross income year over year for the last 4 years. We have a team of 3 part-time employees, one of whom is with me today. This is Maggie Gilmore. Maggie is our administrator and our farmers market coordinator. Firefly Farm, as I said, is in its 4th year of business. It is a small crop, specialty crop, organic farm specializing in heirloom tomatoes. We sell tomatoes and other produce to 28 local restaurants in the greater metropolitan area. This year, in 2018, we have planted 600 heirloom tomato plants, and 19 other fruit and vegetable crops in 3 seasons. As you can imagine, the economics of specialty crop farming are pretty tight, and our profit margin reflects that. So we became very interested in agritourism. Agritourism has a profit margin rate about 3 times that of growing. So we started looking at the agritourism opportunities that we could expand our farm business. So in order to do that, we have added 2 columns to our farm business. We have added events, and we have also added a venue. And so I want to tell you a little bit about our events. Some of them are currently allowed under the current zoning, and some of them we need to change zoning to be able to continue to hold. The first type of event, there are 3 types of events we run under this column of our business, and the first type is farm-to-table dinners. So we have local guest chefs come out and create 5-course meals. We source everything off our own farm and occasionally supplement with our friends' farms with the goal of acquiring all the produce from within 100 miles of our farm. We sell, each dinner has about 50, give or take, seats, running at about $70 a ticket, and we sell out very quickly on those events. We'll run a whole series of those this September and October. The second type of event is our farmers markets. We're in our 2nd year. I should step back to say we're in our 3rd year of farm-to-table dinners, and we're in our 2nd year of our farmers markets. And these are extremely popular events. In fact, in order to support our request, we started an online petition, and within 1 week we had 700 of our neighbors signing in support of this petition to you, with some pretty complimentary comments and supportive comments by people who live in our neighborhoods. This spring, as Dave said, we did begin to develop some infrastructure for our farm. We put in a ground asphalt parking lot, 200 feet long and 60 feet wide, which well exceeds the minimum as listed in the agritourism bill, resolution that was written by this department, approved by this body and the county commissioners. In that document, it is required to have a 50-foot driveway and parking lot. So we well exceeded the minimum requirements, and you can see it in full use in the current picture on the screen. We curate our list of vendors with the goal of offering a diverse range of organic products so customers from the surrounding neighborhoods can gather everything required to eat well for a week or more. At our June market, we had 19 vendors and between 400 and 500 paying customers that came to our June market. If we are successful in our bid to adjust our zoning, we plan to launch a series of yoga events. Yoga in the Big Barn, they'll start this fall, and they'll have a farm-to-table component with canapes and farm-to-table canapes and beverages being served post-stretch. So that completes the 3 types of events we currently have dreamed up for our events column of our business. We also want to launch a rentable venue. We've held 2 wedding parties in our venue to date. We've been making infrastructure improvements for the last 6 months to our barn, and we would like to make significant a significant amount of additional improvements with a official launch after we obtain permission from this body, launching this fall or early next spring. So those are the three columns of our business. Some we're allowed to do now. We can grow now. We can grow in a greenhouse. We can have farm-to-table dinners. But what we're looking for is for official approval to continue to hold our farmers markets and to launch our venue. I want to thank you very much for considering our request for our change to our protective overlay so we can ensure a bright future for our farm as an agritourism destination and neighborhood community partner. If we should not be able to move forward with these agritourism pieces, our farm it may or may not succeed. So we really consider these crucial to the long-term success of our farm. And lastly, I'd like to let you know that I agree with the recommendations of the Planning Department and our planner, Dave Yearout, and ask you to approve them as submitted.
We have another minute, but that's good. Any questions for our owner? Okay, applicant, Mr. Richardson.
We have a list of, we have a recommendation here which has 9 items on it. You're telling me you're in agreement with that recommendation. Is that right?
I am. I called Dave yesterday to get some clarification on some of those pieces, and after our discussion, I felt comfortable agreeing with the entire piece as presented, as recommended and presented.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Mr. Blake?
What's your typical attendance at your farm and our farm market that you guys
Farm
do?
markets,
Yeah.
we're still increasing, but between 400 and 500 people over 2 hours.
Awesome. Do you guys hire like police and fire and bathrooms and all that stuff? Do you have enough amenities to actually hold that
So
many
we
people?
hire, we have, for bathrooms, we use porta pots that we bring in, which is pretty standard for agritourism. So these things are usually held in people's barns and farmyards, and most people do not have solidly built facilities, so they rent and bring in. And that is indeed what we're doing. And then on the parking, we use 3 of our employees that are stationed at various positions they have walkie-talkies, they have vests, and they coordinate. We have considered that if it gets much bigger than its current size, that we may need to go to hiring off-duty policemen, as I see up the street they do on Sundays at the churches that were mentioned earlier today. So that's something that we're monitoring. So far, we felt like we've been able to be responsive, but it's something that we're watching.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Cindy.
So can you tell me number one, what do you charge for the booths, and how much growth capacity do you have to continue to add booths? What would be the max?
So right now, we want to keep this market fairly small. We don't want to grow it over, about 25 booths would be where we'd like to cap it. So we're looking for that intimate feel. We don't want to put 100 booths out in our pasture. We want to keep it right about 25, give or take. But yeah.
Questions? Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this case?
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Stevens. I live at 1912 North Talleyrand Street in Wichita. I have known the Garshes most of my life. I grew up in Andover. And I have to say, I've watched them. It's easy to look at these pictures and say, these things are just there. I have watched them sweat and toil, investing their heart and soul and their resources considerably into this effort. My daughter sells casseroles at this event at the farmers market, been very successful. If you've never been out there, I don't know if a visit is required. I think it would be a good idea. It is a great venue. Pecan trees, a small orchard. They've expanded out into a pasture in recent years. You might have noticed the old International Orchard tractor that Ronnie rebuilt and has had in the family for years. He is also, I don't know if this makes a lot of difference, but he is in the area known as one of the best vintage Moto Guzzi motorcycle mechanics in the area. He has a building full of motorcycles, as a matter of fact. I would just urge you to approve this request, not just because it's good for the Garshes, but because in my estimation, it is good for the community. Very good. And one other thing, I don't believe there's any sidewalk connectivity required. Thank you.
Never know. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Harrison. I live at 1125 North Linden Circle. I've known the Garshes and Rick all of my life. Grew up in Andover and now reside in Wichita. My reason for urging you to allow them to continue this venture is to preserve one of the few family farms remaining. I grew up with the exposure to agriculture, learning the consequences of actions, of getting out and doing the work or not doing the work. And I see the family farms disappearing. I have 5 grandchildren. I would like for them to still have the opportunity to experience that. And for families to be able to come out and see a working farm is a great educational event for all. That's my reason for hoping that you approve these amendments and allow them to continue. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Next speaker. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, just a minute, sir.
No, actually, before the next speaker, is there anybody here who wants to speak in opposition? I think we're ready to go forward if there's no one who wants to speak in opposition.
We're going to bring this back to the committee.
Yeah.
Mr. Warren, we're looking to you for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Warren, a second by Mr. Green. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? 10-0. Thank you all. It's nice to have people speak in positiveness. All right, this time we are going to take up a non-public hearing item, but the public's welcome to stay. And I see they're not going to. Mary, would you like to introduce the item and do whatever you want to do and hand it off if necessary?
Computer help?
Yeah, I did too.
All right, Chairman and members of the commission, my name is Mary Hunt with MAPD. Each year, the Capital Improvements Program for Sedgwick County and the City of Wichita is prepared for your review. And the CIP includes projects for the upcoming 5 years, which will be 2019 to 2023. So today, Jim Weber of the Public Works Department for Sedgwick County will present the CIP for the county, after which the commission will determine if the program presented conforms to the community investment plan as required by Kansas law. So currently, the city of Wichita is scheduled to appear here at the next meeting on July 12th, and with their capital improvements program for a similar consideration. So with that, I ask Jim to step up here, and he'll begin his presentation.
Okay, I need to say that 2 weeks ago, we heard this at the advanced plans, and we recommended approval to the MAPC. Jim?
So as such, do we have to hear it again? And the lawyer's shaking their head, yes, okay, all right, well, I ask, okay.
I don't think you're going to get off, Jim, so go ahead.
I'll try to be brief, but there's a few slides here. Is somebody driving this, or did I just do that? Okay. If you don't know, my name is Jim Weber, and I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for Sedgwick County. And we've been doing this for quite a few years together, so please chime in anytime you have a question or a concern. Just kind of a run-up of our process. The county manager will present our budget and our CIP at the same time to the Board of County Commissioners on July the 18th. So I guess keep in mind that what I'm sharing with you today is not necessarily the final product, but history has shown it probably is the final product, but it's possible it could be a small change. They'll have their first public hearing on July 25th. They'll have a second one on August the 9th, and they're scheduled to adopt the budget on August the 15th. So our purpose, I think Mary's covered it pretty well, but we need to disseminate information to you on the CIP. I want to give you a speech that justifies their finding that the CIP meets the community investment plan goals, and then we'll ask you to actually make that formal determination when it's all over. And again, you know this, but our current comprehensive plan is the community investments plan. So we've got about 600 miles of road. That's 1,269 lane miles because some of them are 4 and 5 lane roads, multi-lane roads. We've got about 600 bridges on the National Bridge Inventory System. So those bridges are all at least 20 feet in length. There's another category of things that the state calls bridges that's between 20 feet in length and something 25 square feet in size that we take care of, even on township roads. And then there are the regular culverts. So there are probably thousands of all those when we get done. And we have in our inventory 13,000 signs. We like to think of our projects in 4 main buckets. There's one to maintain the system. There's one to enhance the system. We like to expand the system to some extent, and we have this quality of place bucket. So we'll just talk briefly about what we think maintain means. So our preventative maintenance program, which is the biggest thing we do on road maintenance, is part of maintaining the system. We think that if we take a road and we replace it with the same type of road, so a 2-lane that gets replaced with a better 2-lane, that's still maintaining the system. We might do some minor enhancements in a project like that, add a turn lane or something, but we don't think that kicks it into the enhancement bucket. And most of our bridge replacements maintain the system. It's just they age out and it's time to replace them, and so that's really just maintenance of the system. Enhancement projects we think are things that relieve bottlenecks, improve safety, or add capacity. Expansion projects would add significant capacity or might be places where we're creating new routes. Quality of place would be bike ped projects and public space infrastructure, park infrastructure. So our goals in our program are to perform preventative maintenance on our roads every 6 years. So that means we need to treat 210 lane miles a year. And we need to replace bridges every 60 years. So we need to average 10 replacements a year, and that's by contract, and we do about a half a dozen a year with our county forces. They're smaller ones. At some point we might run out of those, but right now we're finding plenty to work on. Run through the kind of the projects real quick, and these are 5-year totals that you're looking at. R134 is a bucket, for our projects. We do need to go out and buy right away. We might have to have a utility that's in a private easement relocated. We put $200,000 a year in there to do that. That's $1 million. This R175 is the big one. This is a preventative maintenance. This is where we go do this 210 miles of a road every year, lane miles. That thing totals out to almost $49 million over the 5 years. R264 is a place where we do miscellaneous drainage projects, a little less than $3 million. And this is a place where we have drainage we might have to deal with in the right of way. It's not necessarily road reconstruction, but maybe it's some culverts, or we got to put a storm sewer in, or hire a contractor to do something. R331 is our traffic control. So we buy our traffic sign materials out of that. And we have a program where we repaint the stripes on our county roads every other year. So it's kind of a north half, south of the half the county thing. So that's almost $3 million over 5 years just to keep that stuff up. We have a project R352, which is a new one. We have a piece of 127th Street. Odd thing that 127th keeps coming up today, but this is between Central and 13th. There's a piece that's kind of fallen into disrepair, and we're working on a four-party deal with the city of Wichita and Minnehaha Township and the Crestview Improvement District to try to make some major repairs to this particular mile of road. Our bridge system, so we have two major repairs. We have a couple of bridges over the Arkansas River. One of them is on the Ridge Road, and the other one's on the Bentley Road, which is 151st Street West. And those bridges, they're old bridges. They're in pretty good shape, but they need some major repairs to the bearing devices that are holding it up, or some of the joints in it. So these look like minor bridges, but if we had to replace those, the replacement value of those is probably $6 million a piece. So this is kind of a pretty good size maintenance shot in the arm just to keep those things going. They'll last quite a bit longer if we do that. We have 24 other bridge replacements worth $26 million. So we're saying we have a total of 26 bridge projects. Is that misspelled? No. Okay. I keep finding things in this PowerPoint. I hate to say it. Enhancements. We have a project going with City of Wichita. There's some WAMPO, federal funding through WAMPO to do Greenwich Road from Harry to Pawnee. So the north half miles in the city limits, the south half miles in the county, but it's inside of a couple of improvement districts, and they'll probably never be able to annex it. So they're running the project, but we're splitting the local share. It's about a $5 million project. We have $500,000 in that one. 348, we've identified a place up by Mays near their industrial park that's on a township road right now, and so we've earmarked some money to go up there and rebuild a half mile of 53rd, from 53rd up to the railroad tracks, if you're familiar with that. R350, you're probably used to having me come over here and talk about our program where we are converting 5 miles of township roads every other year from a gravel road, township road, to a paved county road. The plan is to stop doing that, and we're going to start putting that money into the 600 miles of roads that we already have. So R342 has dropped out, R350 is coming in. This gives us $1.5 million a year in 3 out of the 5 years. That should get us 15 miles of some of our not so good roads converted to better roads. 351 is a project that was identified. It's down at Campus High School at 55th and Meridian. This one is set up as 50% special assessments to the Hayesville School District, 50% county, and coincidentally, the school district signed the petition on Monday night, so this thing is, it's been kind of a placeholder, but this looks like a real thing because they're willing to put their half into it. Expansion, what we have here, we still are working on the Northwest Bypass right away. And just round numbers, it's going to take about $50 or $51 million to buy the right of way for the Northwest Bypass. We are about a third of the way through, about 17 millions in. We're in the last 2 years of a 5-year agreement with KDOT. They're matching us dollar for dollar. The City of Goddard and the City of Mays are also contributing. This goes into a pool that's managed by KDOT, and whenever there's a hardship case, something's trying to convert from a kind of a low value use to a high value use, KDOT gets notified, and they start working with the people and then make a decision about whether they're going to try to take that right away before it turns into a, I don't know, car lot or something, doctor's office or whatever. Historically, I think y'all recognize that the City of Wichita spent more money buying right away on East Kellogg than they've spent building roads. And so this is an attempt to stay out of that. This road is not needed for a while, but we need to preserve the corridor. There is a protective overlay in our zoning that kind of triggers this conversation to happen. It does not stop people from developing or going forward with things, but it's a place where if you step inside that footprint, the people at MAPC or Metropolitan Planning, they get a hold of us, we get a hold of KDOT, and then we just stand back and let them have a conversation. Anyway, this continues. There's $650,000 of our funds left in for that project in the next 2 years. Quality of place, we'd identified a spot that really has a legitimate cow path on it that starts at the main gate at McConnell on the east side, really the gate to base housing, and runs up. There were some schools and things up along Rock Road on the east side. We'd gotten some calls about it and looked at it and said, yeah, this definitely needs something. This is a little bit bigger project than we anticipated, but we'll start at the main gate at McConnell. We'll run up till we hit the city's path system up at Mount Vernon. And that's coming up. This other one is the third phase. We had Aviation Pathways been working with federal money, and it connects Derby system with Wichita system. It connects at MacArthur and just west of K-15. This one was going fine. We had a little problem with the machinist union getting some right of way. I'm not saying anything bad about them. I'm just saying this was a fact. They had a problem with us about a crosswalk over inside of the Spirit Complex. Things got kind of balled up. The crosswalk is in. They're happy. This is to go back now and try to finish that path up and get it all connected to the Wichita system. Phase 2 is under construction, should start any day now, and we'll get it up most of the way. This is just an overall, if you like, expenditure numbers. I'm going to flip on to the one that's a percentage. Basically, we're putting 61% of our funds into the road maintenance, 29% into maintaining bridges, 7.3 in enhancement projects, and 1.5 in expansion, and a little less than 1% for quality of place items. Whoops, went the wrong way. So our 5-year summary, I won't read this to you again. I just told you those numbers. This is, if you're interested, this is kind of a summary of our funding sources. Bulk of our money still comes from the local sales tax that was initiated back, I don't know, 30 years ago. We supplement that. We get some money directly from federal money directly from KDOT through the Federal Exchange Program. That's the red bar. We are planning to use some bonds. As you probably know, that's an ongoing conversation all the time at the courthouse about whether we like bonds or don't like bonds. But right now the plan is to do bonds in 3 out of 5 years. And this purple is a little bit of other funding that we have. So the community investments transportation goal number 1 was to preserve and maintain a safe, cost-effective, and reliable transportation system that strategically supports the economic growth, vitality, and quality of life aspirations of our community. And so we think that goal's been met. The plan, when it was done, originally noted that county infrastructure is in good condition. Our proposed CIP continues to make most of the investments, over 90%, in preservation of existing systems with strategic enhancements where needed. Goal number 2 was to improve and increase the movement of goods, people, and information with better connectivity and mobility options for our community. And so we're continuing to make investments in bike ped facilities that connect cities and communities. And again, I'll note our stuff typically is connecting the big pieces, Derby to Wichita, for example. Anyway, provides interlocal mobility options. We're continuing investments in long-range planning for the Northwest Bypass to prepare the community for future growth and enhanced mobility. So the advanced, as Mr. Johnson indicated, I did speak to the Advanced Plans Committee 2 weeks ago, and they did recommend that the full planning commission find the proposed. This was my typo I found just 30 minutes ago, 2019 through 2013. Let's do 2019 to 2023. Sedgwick County Capital Improvements Program is in compliance with the comprehensive plan, and that is our requested action. You also would have a 3-page sort of summary sheet. Mr. Foster had kind of beat up on me a little bit out in the lobby. He likes the whole thick deal of pages, and I believe that, and I'm going to fix him up eventually. But this, you can flip through this sheet. You can see where we're going. We've added some things this year at the county manager's request. He wanted to see the sufficiency ratings for the bridges that we've programmed, so that's in a column in there. And we've also added the daily traffic for the bridges, just so you can kind of get some idea maybe for how important, how bad you think the bridge is and how important you think the bridge is. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Now,
no questions. I'd look at Cindy Miles as chair of the advanced plans for a motion.
Good questions right here.
Some questions.
We'll delay that.
Nice try, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Warren.
The chart that you had on the enhanced road system, and you made the comment that you're dropping the program where every 2 years, I think 5 miles are added on, and I appreciate that simply because we've always done it that way isn't a reason to continue to do it. But what is the process going to be for identifying roads that do need to be upgraded from gravel road to a blacktop road in the future? How is that process going to be, since we're no longer kind of dividing up the 5 districts of the county, and every couple of years you get a mile? How's that going to change?
Well, I think we haven't developed the process, but I think as a practical matter, the process is kind of go back to what it used to be. It's kind of complaint driven. We'll hear from citizens, commissioners will hear from citizens, we'll look at traffic counts. If something starts to be a problem, we'll have to take some over, but it'll be, what we're doing now, kind of, we just say it's 5 miles and it almost doesn't matter how important it is. You find what this seems to be the most important in a particular commission district at the time. And so,
I can appreciate the change and the reason behind it. There needs to be a process or some way to evaluate, like you said, the needs based on traffic or other factors as to which roads, because we are going to need to improve some of those roads out there.
Sure. It's always been a problem in close to cities. And I would just say, again, this is kind of the part where that's an item that's probably still in our conversation with the commissioners. And so if something was to flip, this might be it. I don't know. I think it's going to go this way, but it's a thing they'll have to discuss together.
Next question. Dave?
Jim, you started to mention the sufficiency rating. I noticed there's a range of about 18 to 65. Could you describe what that means in terms of your decision-making process?
Okay, so the sufficiency rating is comes out of the Federal Bridge Inspection Program. They devised this years ago. Bridges in the federal program have to be inspected every other year. So we have our own in-house bridge engineer. She does our bridge inspections. Other people use consultants, but in any case, it's supposedly, and I believe it is. There's a very defined system of how you do this. And the black box software gives you a rating number. And so the significance really is that it's a 100 scale rating. If you're going to apply for federal money, you can get federal money to rehabilitate a bridge if its rating goes below 80. You can get federal money to replace a bridge if its rating goes below 50. So in our interpretation of the way we're operating is, if it goes below 50, we think it's time to start programming it into the program for replacement. And so it's kind of odd, though, because you really need the assistance of a structural engineer, because some things that drag the score down are more dangerous than others. And the amount of traffic on it makes a difference. So the lower it gets, the more anxious we are to get it on the program, get it replaced. We're down, in fact, we just looked at this yesterday. We have 43 out of the 600 bridges that are below 50, rated below 50. And so we can never get them all programmed at the same time, because as soon as we replace one, this other one comes down. So it's kind of like a standing number. The ones that you're seeing that are up in the 60s, see, that's where it's a little odd too. The fact that it's rated above 50 doesn't mean it's the best bridge either. For whatever reason, sometimes it's because the bridge is just too small and it's got erosion around it and everything needs to be replaced. A couple of those, the ones on the Arkansas River that we're doing the rehab jobs, those will be rated pretty high today still, and they'll go up some after we do the rehab work, but their life will be extended. They won't be deteriorating as quickly. These things literally you could do a deterioration curve on these things. And I guess the other thing, if you're interested, is that the bridges that are out on township roads where nothing gets salted last longer than the ones that are on a county road where we salt the heck out of it. So just they have individual characteristics. They're like your children. You just have to keep track of them all.
Mr. Richardson.
Jim, has there been there's been talk, but any study at all about making the Northwest Bypass a turnpike in some ways that pays for itself? I mean, we're looking at, who knows if your match will even be approved next year, and you're a third of the way there, and we've been at this for 10 years or whatever.
The answer is there has been conversation about that. I have been in the room and there's conversation about that. Nothing has gelled yet, but it's on the range of possibilities.
And would that be the Kansas Turnpike Authority that does that? I mean, are they allowed to do others besides what they have now? I'm confused about it. I mean, in Oklahoma they can do that. I don't know about in Kansas.
They're the logical people. I assume they could legally do that, or I assume if you did that, maybe some legislation would be needed to make it happen, but I don't think anybody else wants to get in the business. They have been in the room for these conversations.
And, okay, the other comment I'd have is that I'm glad to see you're working on 127th there. The only downside of that is I'm gonna really miss that as a place to test drive cars, because that's, if you wanna know how they ride, you take them along that mile, and then you go get another one and take it along the same way. It's a great comparison. I'm gonna miss that. So.
What you learned today?
Well, you could probably find some roads in another municipality that you could test them on.
Any other questions from Mr. Weber? Mr. Blake?
You kind of answered my question earlier about bridges, because I know the city's had a problem with the pylons and stuff. Do you see a lot of those concerns, kind of like what was down on the river? Do you see those concerns out in the county with creeks and rivers outside of Wichita, or is that mostly just inside?
I'm not sure what they're running into, but the inspection, when our engineer does her inspections, we get there's the inspection that goes, information that goes to KDOT, and then she produces for us every other year a report. And it will include, she's picking up things like, has it got a bunch of debris stacking up on it? Is there an erosion problem that's going to get us into more trouble if we don't deal with it? The last one, the 2016 inspection, I think she gave us 150 bridges that we need to go visit to do something. Doesn't necessarily have to be done to the bridge itself, but something around the bridge to make sure and preserve and maintain it.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Weber. It's always a pleasure having you here.
I love it.
And now I'll look to Cindy.
I move to approve.
Second.
Well spoken. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? I think that was everybody. So we're down to 11-0. Thank you, everybody, for staying. Our last two meetings have averaged about 4 hours, so. 5:15 last week.
I was gonna pass that down.
How's it going?
Probably not.
Yeah, no, it would pause there and pause. It goes, what?